On November 30th, 2014, CJ tweeted, "Black people are the most racist of all. Chip on their shoulder thinking life owes them. My timeline during the early hours was disgusting. One called me mayonnaise. One called me mayonnaise. One called me Mayonnaise Boy." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's episode 200, and I really was racking my brain to decide what to do. Do I try to find a super extra important tweet to do? But the truth is, I've done a lot of the super extra important tweets, and a lot of them I want to do with more preparation, and I decided to do a tweet that is just special to me. I say that because this is one of the first tweets that I remember seeing at the time and being like, this is a classic, and always wanting to remember it. Like, just 6 months later, I was tweeting, "Let's not forget this guy." I don't know what about this is so funny to me, but it is the funniest thing in the world to me still. There's just so many things going on that make it hilarious, but there's just something inherently funny about sincerely complaining like, "Hey, whoa, they took it too far. They called me Mayonnaise Boy." I also think from a comedic perspective, it is so perfect that it's in two separate tweets. That in the first tweet, he is talking about how disgusting the people on his timeline were the night before, and you expect he's going to say something absolutely vile in the next tweet, that they insulted his mother, they insulted someone in his family, they did something so horrible, and no, what they did was, they called the Mayonnaise Boy. Unfortunately, I don't actually remember what the argument that CJ was talking about was about, and because this was 2014, and this wasn't a famous person, it wasn't documented at the time, I really did try to figure out what it was, but all the stuff has been washed away, deleted at the time. But based on how he reacted to being called Mayonnaise Boy, I don't think he was making nuanced critiques about the racial hierarchies in America. And besides it being silly, I think that this reaction is actually a perfect encapsulation of why there are so many racial issues in the United States. Because in the face of a massive power imbalance and hundreds of years of racism against black people, if a white person gets insulted by one black person, the reaction is not to be like, "Oh, that was one black person insulting me." It was, "No, black people are actually the most racist ones. I'm actually the victim here." Like, he has the right to have his feelings hurt by being called Mayonnaise Boy, but to then conclude that black people are the most racist of all and they're vile, when on the other side is hundreds of years of chattel slavery and Jim Crow and all that, you kind of seem like an idiot with absolutely no sense of perspective. And that's generally when this tweet is referenced, when someone complains about something that's really minor in the face of a much bigger problem. Like, a good example is when Sheriff David Clark, you know, the guy with the hat, said that at the Women's March he was taunted by several women and no one did anything about it. David Roth responded, quote, "One called me Mayonnaise Boy." Because obviously he's a super abusive sheriff, and a couple of people taunting him is tantamount to being called Mayonnaise Boy. The people taunting him do not actually have the power in that situation. The great Jamel Bowie, who I would love to have on this show sometime, quote tweeted an article where a person was complaining that people were making fun of rich people in their presence and they didn't know that they were rich, and Jamel said, "The worst hardship since that guy got called Mayonnaise Boy." Back in August, when former White House pill pusher Ronnie Jackson was complaining about all the things he was called in the media, Ben Slim Witch Trial said, "I was waiting for the one called me Mayonnaise Boy." And because I'm me, I have some sports examples. When Tom Haberstroh, who's actually a friend, a nice guy, reported about how John Morant called a ref a hoe, Trill Bro Dude quoted it and said, "One called me Mayonnaise Boy," sort of being like, come on, this is not that big of a deal. When Warriors staffers were complaining about how they were treated in Boston, Sports Nom said, "One call me Mayonnaise Boy." And when Antonio Brown was feuding with former Raiders GM Mike Mayock, this was a whole ordeal. It had to do with him not wanting to wear a helmet. It's whatever. Someone posted a photo of Mike Mayock giving a press conference and said, quote, "Antonio Brown called me Mayonnaise Boy." Honestly, that seemed like a thing that Antonio Brown might have done, so I had to look it up to make sure that this wasn't an actual quote. Colin points out one that actually might beat Mayonnaise Boy, where this guy Mike was talking about debating with Antifa and said that they resorted to name calling, mostly calling him Grimace. Now, obviously, because I'm a Mets fan, Grimace is a close personal friend of mine, so I would not consider it an insult to be compared to Grimace, but in this context, I would never admit to being compared to Grimace. And the Mayonnaise Boy tweet is even used sometimes in serious situations, when there was the whole discussion of whether or not leftist spaces are, isolating and hostile to men. I'm not going to give a take on that. Vivian said, "No, leftist spaces are not hostile to men. Y'all just like being dramatic, framing occasional ribbing as persecution. It's giving one called me Mayonnaise Boy." And I think a reason I wanted to cover this tweet for 200 is because a lot of what I want to do with this series is to introduce tweets to younger generations who weren't necessarily on Twitter at the time. And unlike some tweets from 2014, this one didn't really survive as much. Like I showed, there still are some examples of it being used in the past few months, but it definitely does not have the staying power as some other big tweets. And at the risk of sounding like an old fogey being like, "You had to be there, man," You had to be there, man. It wasn't an all-consuming thing. It wasn't like we only tweeted about the mayonnaise boy guy for a whole day, but it definitely was a thing where I woke up that morning and I saw people referencing this, and it's like, what are they talking about? I see the tweet, it's like, whoa, is this guy really complaining about getting called mayonnaise boy? Let me just give a quick correction. I just looked it up, and November 30th, 2014 was a Sunday, and I was in my freshman year of college, so what I should have said is, I woke up that afternoon. And it probably was just an illusion, but it feels like at the time, posts like this were a little more innocent, because I didn't have to worry about that guy getting retweeted by the richest man in the world. One post someone made recently that made me laugh, which didn't get any retweets at all, but I really appreciated it, so Ned Lobster, this is a shout out because this made me laugh, mocking all those articles that are like, I spoke to ChatGPT for 2 hours, and what happened frightened me. Ned Lobster writes, I spent an hour with ChatGPT. The results should frighten everyone. It called me mayonnaise boy. And if that doesn't sum up how ludicrous complaining about being called mayonnaise boy is, I don't know what does. Like seriously, how have you never been called worse than mayonnaise boy, especially on the internet? I'll probably get called worse in the comments of this video. Not that that's an invitation. Follow me for a new tweet every day and go to patreon.com/museum of Twitter in order to subscribe. You get the weekly museum of not Twitter, and you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. And I want to say how happy I am to have made it to episode 200. I'm so happy that people are still tuning in. And as a little bonus, I announced to my Twitter followers and my followers on TikTok, I'm doing a Q&A episode. I mean, it's already been recorded by the time you're seeing this, where I took questions from Twitter followers, TikTok followers, and followers everywhere.